And we're live. Hello, everyone. It's Wednesday. It's a weekday. I'm Duane Whitmer, and this is our weekly Whitmer Wednesday. Like I said in 24, we switch things up and we're doing a little bit more interviews about direct action, why you should do direct action, why direct action is good, and what is direct action, and pointing out examples and how you can get involved politically by not being involved politically. And this week we got James Ostrowski, he's a mentor of mine, a pretty good guy. He wrote a book on direct action, and we're going to talk about why direct action is important, why you should do direct action, and why direct action is great. So, Jim, give us a little intro about yourself, and then we'll get into this.
Um, Thanks for having me on. So I don't know what to say. I'm speechless. I literally don't know what to say. No, I'm a longtime libertarian. Been a libertarian longer than most of you people have been alive, sometimes twice as long. So a lawyer, I'm a writer, and more recently, I'm an advocate of direct action as opposed to politics, and we can get into exactly what that means. But politics is basically trying to convince somebody else to do something, and direct action is deciding to do something yourself. And direct action is a lot better because you don't have to convince anybody else to do it. So, but that's just an intro.
Now, historically, do you think electorally over the history of our country, are we getting more freer or less freer? What would your opinion on that be?
There's no question. Since 1776, we've gotten steadily less free. In other words, the government's gotten steadily bigger. Now, there's long periods where the government stayed about the same size, and it's certainly gotten bigger in the last 115 years or so. But the general trend is it always gets bigger. It grows in a ratchet effect, like Robert Higgs's book, Crisis in Leviathan. Government grows usually when there's a big crisis, like a war or a depression or a lesser crisis, and then it gets bigger all of a sudden really fast. And then after the crisis, like let's say the COVID lockdown, it tends to get a little smaller, but it's always bigger after the crisis is over than before the crisis. So government got really big during World War One. After World War One, Harding and Coolidge shrank the government a lot. But after that, it was still bigger than it was before World War One. So it grows in a ratchet-like effect. The general tendency of government is to grow. In other words, if you go to sleep at night, and this is literally true, by the time you wake up in the morning, I actually never really thought about this until now. You go to sleep at night, you wake up in the morning, government's bigger than it was when you went to bed, and that's because the debt's growing all the time, and for other reasons. But the general tendency of government is to grow.
Now, as government grows, I think we can both agree the quality of the service. Most people that watch this know I think the government is nothing but a jobs program. You pay taxes, so the politician's cousin who's too dumb to survive in the real world in the market of ideas doesn't starve in a gutter, as we see all over the place. And so,
that Irish welfare.
I can
say that because I'm half Irish.
You can say that because I'm super German, so I can't say that. But yeah, it's essentially how it works. Is essentially I pay taxes so that some moron who can't function in society doesn't starve in a gutter, and then provides very subpar services. But if I don't pay my taxes, men with guns take my shit, and then I go to jail. So really, it's this mafia scheme, and I think we both agree, as evidenced by a ton of tests and studies that show as government has gotten bigger, Medicaid, I know you've done a study on that. All this government investment into healthcare and our longevity hasn't increased, our health hasn't increased. All this money into public schools and that's not getting better. Our world test scores we're going down in our world ranking in quality of schools and stuff. And lastly, I have a theory. Before we get into it, is that The reason why you're seeing all these driving bans in Western New York is because all these kids go to government school and they're taught a squared plus b squared equals c squared. But they're not taught that if you drive a 2003 Honda Civic on bald tires, you can't drive through a foot of snow. And they go off the road and they say, help me, Father Government. I went off the road. And the government, to prevent the mass embarrassment that is the average increase, the average IQ of the population decreasing, they just say, stay off the road, idiots. And that's what they got to do. But now direct action, anyone can do it. And there's multiple levels of direct action. So why don't you give us, what are your favorite forms of direct action? What are things that you think everyone should do, easy to do, or it's the most important thing to do?
Well, the first thing to do is actually not super easy, but you have to empty your brain of all of the bullshit you've been taught and all the propaganda that's been pushed into you. And that's actually, it sounds easy, but it's actually not that easy. So, but education, in primarily, I mean, educating yourself, that's the first line of defense. And the government, a lot of people don't really understand. Most people think that the government maintains its power because of guns and police. That's not really true. The reason why the government's powerful is because the public acquiesces to its authority over us. And actually, history has shown examples. For example, the fall of Iran under the Shah, I think it was 1979, about the fall of Juan Marcos after he tried to steal an election. When the government obviously has no legitimacy, it falls very quickly. So the key strategically, and unfortunately, we never talk about strategy or tactics, and I think that's all I think about all day long is strategy and tactics. The first thing you have to do is stop acquiescing to the government's authority over you. And I know that's a big mouthful, but that's a form of direct action, just to realize that basically the government's just a criminal gang and treated accordingly. I'm not saying, go to war against it or anything like that. That's silly. But I'm just saying, stop treating it like it's some sacred religious thing, as some people on the right, frankly, treat the government almost like it's, endorsed by the Bible. It's not endorsed by the Bible. Jesus never said anything about the government should do. So that's point one. One of the most important decisions you have to make. Sorry about that. One of the most important decisions you have to make is where to live. And so voting with your feet is really a huge form of direct action. And, for example, New York is the least free state. And although, yes, it's a pain in the ass to pull up and leave, you have commitments, jobs, relatives, and so on. Everybody makes a decision. A certain percentage of the population is always moving at any given time. So when it does come time for you to move, figure out, well, where should I live? What's the freest state? And there's actually rankings online, the Free State Project. They emphasize New Hampshire, but freedom in the 50 states, that's the study. My website, libertymovement.org, has the list of the freest counties. Right now, for example, just by way of example, the freest state is New Hampshire, Florida's second. I think Indiana's third, Tennessee's fourth, and so on and so forth. And, New York, California are at the bottom, New Jersey, states like that. But even if you say, well, I have to live in New York, you could still choose to live in a freer county, a freer town, a freer school district. School district taxes, by the way, which is a huge chunk of property taxes in New York, they vary widely in tax rates. So even if you say, oh, I have to live in Erie County or I have to live in West New York, you can still make a choice. Or you could say, well, I work in West New York, but I can live in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is a much freer state than New York. So voting with your feet, that's another huge factor. Voting with your children. In other words, where are you sending your children? And, we've spent 50 years trying to reform government schools. It's all failed. It's all bullshit. You can't reform these places. I've explained why in my book, Government Schools Are Bad for Your Kids, and in other books. You can't reform a bureaucracy. I'm not going to get into bureaucracies because I know you want to move fast and cover a lot of topics. Forget that. Either homeschool or go to a private school. So those are major forms of direct action.
I actually just shared a link to your book that government schools are bad for your kids. So it's in the link. It's in the feed. Now, direct action, it doesn't rely on voting for a politician, a political party, a political committee, a political body. Right. It doesn't matter who I voted for. It doesn't matter if my candidate wins. To be honest, it sounds like I don't even give a shit about candidates because they're irrelevant to the big picture of direct action.
Yeah, it's all. Can I swear?
Yeah, I do.
It's all bullshit. Voting has not resulted in an increase in liberty since 1800. Now, I know that sounds preposterous. Check it out, and if I'm wrong, you tell me. Jefferson beat Adams, knocked out the Federalists, and Jefferson, of course, because he was Jefferson, a great libertarian for his time, actually did shrink government. He cut the size of the defense forces in half. It was primarily the Navy at that time, and he paid down the debt from the Revolutionary War. And really, Hamilton is often credited for creating the U.S. as a great economic power. It's all bullshit. Hamilton was a bum. It was Jefferson. So, but after that, you can search in vain for an election that actually increased the liberty across the board for American citizens. People say the Civil War. That's not what I'm talking about. American citizens. No, actually, the Civil War made government bigger for almost every American. So that doesn't. It's not a counterexample. Forget it, folks. Do I look stupid to you? Believe me, the Civil War is not a counterexample. So voting, and I've had some podcasts about the technical reasons why voting doesn't work, but basically, the odds that your one vote is going to change anything is silly. But the government uses that one vote they give you, quote, as an excuse to control your life 24/7, 365. One of my new books I'm working on, I'm actually cataloging for the first time I know of the number of times the government uses violence against the individual. And would you believe it's not millions? It's not billions. It's trillions of times a year. So that notion, you've made this social contract. Hey, if I can vote, you can tell me what to do the rest of the year. It's the worst bargain of all time. And actually, nobody actually signed that social contract. It's bullshit. Like almost everything you learn about politics. So politics doesn't work. But let's say I move to New Hampshire, I have with my one vote elected a new set of laws that govern me. And there's much lower taxes, much lower regulations. I don't even think they require you to buy car insurance there, but they didn't at some point in the past. That's just an example. If you move to Tennessee, you don't have to get a pistol permit. If you move to Montana, there's other benefits to that, Indiana, and so on. So direct action works, politics does not. But you and I both know it's been so difficult for me to convince people of this. I'm not sure exactly why, but politics and voting, it's kind of the old standby. We're sort of brainwashed into thinking this is what you do. In many ways, God forgive me, but I said in one of my books that the libertarian movement, we like to go to meetings because it's entertaining. I like meetings too. I like to go to meetings and have speeches and hit the bar later, and it's fun. It's entertaining. Unfortunately, it doesn't accomplish anything.
Amen. That's as someone who was involved in the LP for a bit. It seems like they're really good at online debates and not good at accomplishing things, and I think that's just another issue. But
and look, I've been involved in the Libertarian Party since 1979. I mean, I wish I could report better news. Now the system's rigged just to have two parties and so on. But even, the Republican Party doesn't work. The Democratic Party works well if you want government bigger because they deliver all the time.
I think actually I do disagree. I think that the Republican and Democratic parties do work, but their goal and intent isn't to help you; it's to help themselves. I think that the two major parties, you're talking Niagara Falls. If I could find the recording, I should play that sometime. But where you talk about the machine and what happens when you donate to the Republican and Democratic parties, you're buying a politician. You're buying influence. You see this a lot with, hey, I donated to this candidate, he won, and my company gets this $1 million contract.
Well, the Hyatt Hotel is the best example. Paul Snyder, he gave 14 million. Was it four? No, he gave a couple $100,000 in donations, which we think, wow, that's a lot of money. No, he got $14 million in subsidies for his hotel.
Yeah,
like the best investment in the United States now is to buy a politician.
Oh yeah, it is. It's a great form of it's a great investment. And another great investment is being in Congress apparently and crushing the S&P 500.
Brian Higgins, my old buddy.
Right, that was a great. I actually want to. Here's a form of direct action that I'd like to try, because it'd be funny is I want to talk to a financial advisor, and make a Congress coin or a Congress mutual fund where we track 5 or 10 people in Congress, probably Pelosi, probably Schumer, people that have been there for a long time, like the people that have been there since the people that have been in Congress since segregation, and track their investments and essentially buy and sell what they're selling. I'm willing to bet this is a form of direct action that's probably legal, but we would get dragged in front of the SEC and we'd get dragged. They would go out of their way to mess with us. But I think it would be an interesting thing. It would be an interesting thing to do because it'd be a form of protest and direct action. And I think Congress would have a hard time reacting because we'd be crushing the S&P like they are. And they'd be like, oh, no, you can't do this, and I think that would be an interesting I think that'd be an interesting a thing to do with direct action. My thing is that, direct action, it doesn't know political parties. There's left-leaning direct action. There's right-leaning direct action. And it seems to be that you can do it, regardless of anyone else. And that's one thing.
Well, can I just give you another example? So I'm really excited about the concept, and it sounds counterintuitive, but this concept of walk for liberty or voting with your health. That's a book I'm writing, Voting with Your Health. But this, we've tried, you mentioned healthcare earlier. America's the least healthy, wealthy country, in spite of the fact that, contrary to what the left thinks, the government is massively involved in healthcare. It's massively involved. It pays 50% already. They wanted to pay 100. Can you imagine how horrible that would be? But they pay 50%, but they regulate all of it. So it's all regulated and half paid for, and it's extremely it's horrible. I could talk for 5 hours about why it's horrible, but it is horrible. So what are you going to do about it? You're going to go to the lobby, the legislature, or I have this idea of, how about walking 7,500 steps per day? And it's mind-boggling. If Americans walked 7,500 steps a day, and I personally try to do 10,000. I don't always do it, but I always do at least 7,500. We could cut hospitalizations, doctor's visits, medications, surgeries in half just by that one thing without doing any political activity whatsoever. That's probably my best example of direct citizen action. Now, you're doing it for your health, but you're also doing it to increase the overall liberty of America. And that's why direct action works. The incentive structure in politics is such that, we've all seen it a million times, You join an organization, you're enthused. If we just do this, it'll work. 2-3 years later, it all fails for reasons that are outlined in my books, and some of which we've talked about. And then you get burned out and quit. But you know what? You never get burned out with direct action, because direct action has two facets or features. One is you're immediately improving your own life right now, but it's also helping to advance liberty in society. So there's no way not to benefit from direct action, because you're doing what you should be doing anyway. It just so happens that you're aware that if you do it, and hopefully a lot of other people do it too, but even if they don't, you're moving the country ever so slightly towards liberty. Let's say I moved to New Hampshire. I'm actually starving the beast of New York of what, $3-4 grand a year that they can use to build their political machine and control me and everything. So just that, if now 5,000 people move to New Hampshire, that's huge. But even the one person moving to New Hampshire moves the country ever so slightly towards liberty. But you've revolutionized your own life. You've done tremendous benefit for your own life. So that's why, although politics, unless you're in the political class, political action always gets you burned out and frustrated and angry. Direct action always improves your life. I'm actually beginning to believe this direct action stuff.
Well, the other thing about direct action is if you do look, let's talk the downside to direct action. There are two downsides to direct action, and this is what the government uses, aside from a lot of force. But what does the government use to expand its power? It uses laziness. Real fast, actually, one thing I'd like to point out that you mentioned was I started doing research during COVID, because I was told that you're a piece of shit if you don't get vaccinated. And if you go into hospital, you're taking services from someone else, and you're a real piece of shit, and you don't deserve to get care because it's your fault you didn't get vaccinated. So I started doing research, and you know what the largest burden on our healthcare system is?
I should know, but you tell me.
Obesity.
Oh, no question.
So here was my follow-up. Here was my follow-up to them. So what you're saying is, if someone makes a decision that you don't agree with, and therefore incurs a problem at later point, a decision that they could have prevented, in your opinion, they don't deserve medical treatment. And they're like, yeah. I said, all right, well, why do you hate fat people? So if your fat friend, Rob, who eats McDonald's 4 times a day and is 400 pounds and can't fit his fat ass out the door, well, he's in the hospital. But my grandma, who's 60 years old and 80 years old, and takes care of herself, bumps her hip, and he's jamming up the ER. Why does he get health care? Well, that's different. Well, there is no difference, and yeah, direct action is, I think the government.
The Peter Attia, who's an MD, smart guy, he's on does a lot of podcasts. He talks about the 4 horses of the American apocalypse, and this is going back to the health thing. The 4 leading causes of death in America are all related to lifestyle and can be remedied to a large extent. And that's, I won't go into detail, but that's cardio, cancer, neurological, and everything involving diabetes. Those are the 4 apocalypse of 4 horsemen of the American apocalypse. And walking daily 7,500 steps and other things that I'm going to advocate in my forthcoming books will deal with that totally. So yes, you're correct.
Yeah, I think that you'd make a good point with I think you make a good point. Now, with direct action, what if my favorite candidate loses? Can I still do direct action?
Sure. Now, so I'm not saying that you should do no politics. As long as limited as voting is, it is defensible as kind of like, let's call it defensive voting. you go there and you vote for the least evil guy, or you go there, let's say, if you want to at least show the public that the Libertarian Party has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5% of the vote. I'm not saying you can't do that, but in all honesty, though, without the education component, which can only be supplied by direct action, we're never going to win those votes, because, as I pointed out, I did a podcast, one of my favorites, about why voting is sort of rigged. The number one reason why voting is rigged? The government controls the schools. It's like, what? You can't have, if a Martian came down to Earth and said, and you'd said, well, this is how our voting works. First of all, the government brainwashes the electorate. The Martian would say, what? That doesn't make any sense. How can you have fair elections? So without the education component of direct action, and I have a program, for example, on economics, where the 5 things you need to know about economics in order to vote properly. We have no hope anyway. So even if you don't buy my total critique of elections and politics, you still should support direct action, because right now the government brainwashes everybody, and we need alternative forms of education so that people can at least try to vote the right way.
Well, I think the other thing is, why direct action, the downside of direct action is it requires work and effort. And a lot of people think, I have a problem, the government should do it for me, therefore I'm going to vote super hard. And let's be honest, voting is probably the easy,
it's the least you could do.
The easiest form of activism, right? It's the least you can do as far as activism. You go one time and you vote, and I made everything better. I voted. I would argue that also paying taxes to an extent is a low-level form of activism, because you're forced to do it, and you think, well, I paid my taxes, I solved homelessness and poverty. But really, rolling up your sleeves and going out and doing something is more it causes work. Activism, direct action requires sacrifice, it requires work, it requires doing something. But I think that overall the effort put into direct action yields greater rewards.
Exactly. I used to, I don't know if this is a perfect example, but I used to, up until 2011, I was very active in local politics. And I just got sick of it. And I said, you know what? I'm just going to take all that time and quote, as they say, spend more time with my family. But I literally did. I took a lot of that effort and I started coaching my kids in sports. And not that coaching my kids in sports changed the political trajectory, but it was such a much better use of my time than the time I wasted in politics. But if you're wasting a lot of time in politics, you could spend that time much more efficiently doing direct action, in my view.
Yeah, I agree. I think that a lot of people, are getting, it takes work. Now, what direct action tasks do you have planned in the next year? What are you're doing Liberty Walking. What else you got planned this year?
Well, I sort of rolled out Liberty Walking last year. Right now, I'm actually working on a book about the gun control movement, but which I suppose is my form of trying to educate people, and that's a form of direct action. But my book, The Second Amendment Works, which is the first book, this is the sequel to that book, I did talk about some of the things you could do. It sounds a little counterintuitive, but being an educated grand juror and trial juror is actually a form of direct action, because when you're on a jury, your one vote actually counts. That's an example of your vote actually counting, because there's so few people on the jury. So that's one example of direct action related to the issue of the right to bear arms. But those are some of the examples I'm working on.
Yeah, I've been working with I started my own company, my own thing as Act Now Media. We've been doing that as well. which is a First Amendment audit. And actually, Act Now Media turned into this is the direct action I've been focusing on, and really focusing on this is Act Now is accountability, consistency, transparency. I think that people don't realize that it's government. A lot of people you saw coming out of COVID, people assume government name badge means skill. If they have a government paycheck, it means they're more qualified. If they have a laminated name badge from a government agency, it's just that these people, we trust them with everything. And I think that people this false sense of belief, and I think that when I started doing this and I started videoing these people, you build this system where they believe, oh, this guy works for the government. He was elected. He won an election. He's more qualified than I am, or he has a government job. He's clearly more qualified. I think that belief, this facade that government has this all-knowing power or this all-knowing presumption of correctness is false. And that's kind of what Act Now has been doing, is showing that it's not true. There are some really dumb people in government that don't know what they're doing.
Well,
and showing that and kind of peeling back the onion that that this facade that government just knows everything can get you killed. It can really put you in a bad spot. And that's what we've been focusing on, is just showing that there are some holes in that story. And that's my direct action, because it gets people thinking. Well, maybe the government doesn't know everything. And once you start with that thought process, you start to think, maybe I can do more. Maybe I can do better. Maybe I should try it, and it gets you thinking about direct action and just kind of breaking away from the chains that is the government beliefs. And that's really where I got going. And that's where I'm focusing my direct action this year, is this First Amendment auditing, this exposing, this research. And another thing we uncover is that even your local, there's towns that are massively corrupt, that are playing these games behind the scenes that, you think that, Congress, they're all corrupt. Well, of course they are. But even at your local level, there's massive corruption that you can find and stuff like that. And that's really, it's interesting. I've learned a lot just doing it for 3-4 months. I've learned so much. It's very interesting. I encourage more people to do it, going to board meetings and just listening and just asking questions. It's crazy. And then you show up with a camera. Now the government, if I want to fly on a plane, the government grabs my nutsack. But there's a camera everywhere I go. But if I show up with a building with a camera, they freak out. It's like, wait a minute, you can film every second of my day except when I'm in the shower and I'm under a mass surveillance program. But some chubby accountant from Hamburg walks into a building with a camera and it's like freaks out. Everyone freaks out. And I think that's hysterical. I get a kick out of that. It's like, here's a small taste of your own medicine. It's a lot of fun. It's interesting. And it's funny watching these people squirm.
Yeah, well, what you say is correct, but what you're doing really just falls under the category of education. In education, I know it sounds bland and banal and meaningless, but it's not. Because again, the power, the reason why the government has power is not its physical force. It does use that force, and that's a small part of it. It's largely convincing people that the government is doing the right thing, or the government knows what it's doing. And Rothbard had a phrase, the job of the libertarians is to de-bamboozle the public. And I'm always keep that in mind. And that's what you're doing. And that's a lot of what I'm doing, just exposing the nature of government. It's not some miracle worker. It's not a social service agency that we all got together and decided to do. No, it's every state on earth, by which I mean government, got its start through the use of physical force by conquering territory, including the United States, by the way. If you genetically trace the United States, you go back to William the Conqueror invading England because, well, what do you mean, Jim? Well, the states arose out of colonies. What were the colonies? The colonies were colonies of the United Kingdom. Well, what's the United Kingdom? It traces back to William the Conqueror. So every state on earth arose in violence, and that's really the key to understanding it, because it's an agency of violence and aggressive force. It cannot, in reality, by definition or in reality or common sense, be useful to creating a better society. It's always creating a worse society. That's why there's so many problems today in our country. That's why there's so many people who are unhappy. That's why there's so many people who are broke and poor and unhealthy. And, that's why there's so many divisions in society. The Black people and white people have no intrinsic conflict of interest, but it's in the interest of the powerful to divide people into groups and to get the white working class and the Black working class, who have the absolutely same political interests and economic interests, hate each other. These divisions are encouraged by the government because it makes it easier for us to be controlled. So that's the problem we have. The number one problem in society is the damn government. It's not racism or whatever they think they're trying to make you think at any given time. The enemy of, just to stay on that point, the number one enemy of the Black working class when they wake up in the morning is not the white working class. It's the government. And the same is true of the white working class. The Black people are not your enemy. It's the damn government that's your enemy. So that's what we have to do. We have to de-bamboozleize the public, as Rothbard used to say.
Yeah, that's the toughest part, is the education process of explaining to people that you can wipe your own ass. And it's like, where I live in Hamburg, and it's like, insane to me. And it's both sides, it's the Republicans like to say, well, those liberals, and the liberals like, well, those Trumpers. Really, both sides do it. It's weird for me to see, there's a snowstorm. We're getting hammered with snow. And I'm in these community groups because I like to have fun. And you see these people, what has the government said about the snowstorm? Well, get off your fat ass, walk to the window, open the window and see what it's doing outside. Why do you need a politician to tell you it's snowing? And it's like, why do you need the government to give you an update on the snowstorm? Why did it pick up a phone and call somebody, call a friend, it's just this lazy, this American lazy. I actually blame the government, because the government always says, well, we'll solve all your problems. We'll solve all your problems. Just vote for us, give us your money. And, that's that. But
what people don't understand is, we didn't have any of this bullshit in the 1960s and 70s. This notion where everybody's afraid of snow and that the government's going to tell us what to do and when, that didn't exist. This is all new. It's part of the decline of America. We get, as I said in Progressivism, a primer, government makes you dumber. Government makes you fatter. Over time, we get more and more dependent on the government, less able to take care of ourselves. And you see it all the time. You have like 1 inch of snow and the entire area shuts down. And it's because the government loves to get people, Mencken had a quote about this, that basically all these people do is make you afraid of some things to get power over you. He said it a lot better than I'm saying it. And all the things that they try to make you afraid of are almost all imaginary. You call them hobgoblins. So, and that's it, progressivism, which is the predominant ideology of the country. People don't even know it. In fact, including the Republican Party, most Republicans are progressives. I tell them that, and they always get pissed off at me. It's all rooted in the government making you afraid and making you feel weak and inadequate. And again, if people actually understood this, they would be immune to this kind of thing, because they would say, "Oh, I know what you're doing. You're trying to make me afraid of something imaginary to get power over me." Yeah. So we have to educate the whole country as to the how
I
the
think that
makes work.
I think that's the big thing, is that there's this fear-based thing that government has gone, and I've noticed this. I mean, I'm 36, so I'm a little, I'm not young, I'm not old, but I'm 36 is whatever. I feel old.
You're half old.
I've noticed this since 9/11. Because I was old enough to watch. I watched 9/11 on TV when I was like ninth grade. Is ever since 9/11, I really noticed that everyone does. Both sides use fear. You got, well, if you don't fear, we need to pass the Surveillance Act, the Spying Act, and we need to grab your nutsack when you travel because of terrorism. And terrorists are everywhere, and they're going to terrorize us if we don't do this. And then you got, you got to vote for this guy because if racism is going to get you. And then, the Mexican immigrants are going to, abort your daughter and make her trans if you don't vote for this. And then, the white supremacists are going to force you to join their Nazi camp if you don't vote for this. And it's all fear-based, and people are falling for it. And it's like, if you turn the TV off and talk to your neighbor, you're going to realize that, you got a lot in common, and you guys can work together on a lot of things. And it's just this constant bombardment of fear. If you go out in a driving ban, you will die. Or if you don't get vaxxed and boosted, you will die. You'll kill my grandma. You will die. And it's this constant state. We wonder why there's so many mass shootings, and why we wonder why there's so many mass shootings, and there's so many mental health problems. It's because we're drummed in our head that if you're not afraid of everything, you're gonna die. And we all die someday. But it's just this consistent and constant fear mongering where there's a problem and only government can solve it. This is a problem only a large central bureaucracy that is a government jobs program can solve it. And it's just, it blows my mind how many people fall for it, whether it's laziness, whether it's, lack of logical thinking, whether it's just, I don't know.
When you think about it, I mean, when you listen to the messages of the politicians, which is always, everything is getting bad and you need to do what we tell you. Leaving all that aside, it's a very depressing message. The notion that the United States is a country which is conspiring against the interests of Black people, that white people all want to enslave you. I mean, it's such utter bullshit. But think about the psychological impact that has on young Black people. Instead of focusing on how to improve their life and all the opportunities that remain, even with a big government, they're focusing in on, I have no chance because of white racism. On the other hand, look at young white people who are told, you're evil, you're part of an evil tribe. It's got to be incredibly psychologically demoralizing and depressing. So in the process of dividing people and making people feel weak and afraid, it's really has destroyed our country, because I guarantee you in the 1960s, people, it was different. We didn't have this constant stress and depression and hatred of other groups. It wasn't perfect by any means, but it was an optimistic time. I guess you had to be there, but I was there, and I'm telling you, this country is nothing like it used to be, and it's getting worse all the time unless we start to change things drastically. And politics is not the way to change it.
I agree. I think that it's a lazy solution to a pretty big problem. So, Jim, thanks for being on. We're hitting 45 minutes. Anything else you want to say?
No, it's a lot of fun. I'm working on a sequel to The Second Amendment Works, where I'm going to blow away the gun control movement. Everybody's going to get a kick out of it. So that book should be out on March 1st.
I'll look forward to buying it. Can I get one? Can I get a copy?
You're going to have to read it and be part of my proofreading team.
Jim, I went to government school. I can't read. Don't forget to buy your tickets to the ECLP Gala February 17th, a month from today. Erie County Libertarian Party is having their gala at Iliad Apollos.
Oh, we'll be there.
Don't forget to buy your tickets. Yeah, Jim, thanks for tuning in. Like I said, with this, we started interviewing more people to help get people involved and hear different perspectives. And we talk about direct action. And really, my goal is to enlighten people to show them that, relying on a politician, as someone I, Duane Whitmer, am a 4-time bronze medalist in every race I ran. And I alone will tell you that relying on politicians is absolutely useless. If you believe a politician is going to help you, you probably think the stripper likes you. And, it's I hate to be that guy, but it's not true. They're playing you for money. And, it's time to understand that our biggest asset is ourselves, and we need to believe in ourselves more and have faith in ourselves to be able to solve our own problems. And, that's really what I've been pushing. So thanks for being on. I really appreciate you.
Yeah, let's do it again. It was a lot of fun.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Jim. Have a good one.
Okay, bye.
Bye.